Welcome to the Covering Data podcast, covering guests from the data, development, and IT world. Hey everyone, welcome to Covering Data Consulting, the Covering Data podcast. This is episode number 6 with Jamie Anderson of Emergent Software, the CEO, and looking forward to talking to you, Jamie.
Hi, Eric. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, no problem. Do you want to tell people a little bit more about yourself and what you guys got going over at Emergent?
Yeah, sure. I can talk a little bit about my background. I grew up here in the Twin Cities metro area and went down to Iowa State, did electrical engineering at Iowa State back in the 90s, and came back and so my original background, I worked at a company here in town called ADC Telecommunications. Used to be a very large telecommunications equipment manufacturer here in town. And after the kind of 2001 meltdown in the telecom industry, they closed up shop. And so at that point, I started a company called Emergent Networks. I was actually living with my brother at the time and going to Carlson School at night doing my MBA, and started that business back in 2003, so almost 20 years ago, and ended up finishing up grad school and sort of realizing that I had kind of a real business there, and spent the next about 15 years building that business, and it was great. It was more focused on on-premise, infrastructure, networking, data centers, that type of thing. And so kind of where Emergent Software came from and where we got started is we always had a software development team as part of Emergent Networks, and as the rest of the company grew, I think when I sold the business, we were about 130 employees. But as the rest of the company grew, the software development team really just didn't grow with that. We had great clients, we're doing great projects, but it felt like it really needed its own identity, and really wanted to pivot it to focus on software development and cloud and being more cloud native type things. So in 2015, we spun that business out. I also started working with Mark Bajma at the time, who's my partner in the business, and started Emergent Software. So for a while, owned both companies, and it was just kind of very kind of treated them like sister companies and a lot of same clients and things like that. And then in 2017, I ended up selling Emergent Networks to a company out of New York called Presidio. And they're great people, great company. Really enjoyed my experience there, and stayed on with them for 2 or 3 years. And then just about 3 years ago, decided I wanted to get my hands dirty again and get back into building something. So came over to Emergent Software. We had a lot of tailwinds at our back at the time, which was really great. Had a lot of great customers, and we're really starting to build something. And so did that now almost 3 years ago, and really the intent with Emergent Software, what got me excited about that is, we really focus on 3 different areas of technology: software development, cloud transformation, and data engineering. And those are really the 3 pillars. And we do all of that in the Microsoft ecosystem. So it's very Microsoft focused, which in some sense, some people may look at that and go, oh, that's really limiting. There's a lot of people that want to do multi-cloud and all these things, but we really feel like by actually sharpening that focus, it allows us to elevate what we're able to do and have a very focused customer base, and that the customers that are coming to us are looking for, a very focused Azure partner, a very focused, .NET development partner. And so, yeah, so that's what we do. And I like the fact that, looking back at my past business and what we're doing now, it feels like we're kind of skating to where the puck is going. If you allow me to use a hockey term. And not that, on-premise data centers or networks or anything like that are going to go away anytime soon, but we really do feel like the conversations that we're having with CIOs and other people in the IT industry, it's moving towards cloud and cloud native things. So
Yeah, I totally hear you on that. And it's kind of funny too. You were talking a little bit. I was probably a little earlier in my career, but I very much remember the tech bus that you're talking about with the telecom company. I was fortunate enough to be at a local company, Open Access Technology there, and they were, all of their business was like with energy companies, so like they were doing just fine, and I got so lucky there because I remember looking at postings back then, and I was like, for just like really, you know, early mid-level jobs, they were asking about like PhDs and stuff. And it's just like, dang, how the heck do you even try to
yeah,
get a job nowadays? And so I can
yeah,
kind of appreciate that.
it was crazy times because it was like, the stock market was going crazy. Like I remember the company I was at, ADC, like their stock split like twice in a year, and
Oh wow.
and everything was just like people were just investing so much in telecommunications, putting fiber in the ground, all of that. And that's
Hmm.
what that was the products they made. So it was really an interesting time to be there. But then what happened was as the economy kind of turned a little bit there in 2001, all of these telecom providers had kind of purchased all the equipment that they needed, and so there was an oversupply, and so we were making all these products but nobody really needed anymore, and so the sales, and it just kind of snowballed down. So that's kind of the way those economic cycles work sometimes.
Right, exactly. And it's funny where you end up. And actually, too, interesting thing about what you're talking about with Merge Networks, like when you did make that sister company, that makes perfect sense to me because if you're kind of doing that managed services infrastructure, like you know, dev and data are like you know they're like perfect complements to when perfect. I know data, right? That's my thing. But like if you have this database server that you're hosting and it's constantly getting pounded, and it's like, well, we have this database service over here. Hey, we can help out with that. So that actually makes a lot of sense to me. So
Yeah, it was very complimentary, but it felt like just like the separation. It was like, just the developer culture was different. We were doing a
Mhm.
lot of work in financial services, so banks, and like we're going
Okay.
on premise, and like, so, we always said we want you to dress to the level of where your customer's at. So if they want you to be wearing, a sport coat or whatever, that's what you do. And that really differentiated us as an IT company coming in with like well-dressed, technicians and engineers and things.
Yeah.
But then you kind of conversely, like the developer culture at that time, and still is in some sense, was a lot of, flannel and hoodies, and like that's just what they wanted to do. And so, and
Right.
it's really interesting even now, like, you look at coming through COVID and all this, and remote work and all this, and it's even that whole thing has even changed more. And um, we went fully remote. Well, obviously before COVID, we were always kind of pretty remote friendly, but
Mhm.
had this idea of that, like maybe we'll come back to the office, and then finally this past summer we just cut it and closed the office and said we're going to be fully remote, and we have employees in 16 different states. So having these like meetings at the office, but having half of our employees remote, it never worked well. So we're like, let's just own it and go fully remote and embrace it.
Yeah, it has been pretty interesting in that regard. A part of me actually misses the office, like for clients, because you can kind of keep in touch with what's going on, and you can make better connections. But at the same time, it's like I'm just in my office here, and it's like I can talk to anybody, like this podcast, or I can just work with anybody as long as their company has a good network connection. It's like, well, that's all you need, right?
Yeah, there's definitely pros and cons. I mean, you have to be very intentional about that personal connection and
Hmm.
all of that. Like, I'm most days, breakfast and lunch, I'm meeting with a client or meeting with an employee if they're here in town, and we actually flew our whole team um, in September. We flew everyone in and had a 2 day little kind of emergent connect conference, and it's a
Yeah.
little bit of work, a little bit of fun, but um, the idea is some of those in-person connections then can fuel that relationship piece for the next 3, 4, 5 months, and then we'll try to continue to do something in person together. And yeah,
Yeah. Yeah, I saw that on LinkedIn. It looked like you guys are having a blast, at least for the fun part.
yeah, we did. We had a lot of fun.
Yeah. Well, that's really cool. Yeah, and you do got to do at least a little bit of that. Otherwise, it's just a butt in a chair versus, you can't really have a culture with a butt in a chair. You know what I mean? So it's like you got to bond and connect and that kind of thing. So
But yeah, I mean, back to what you were originally saying, like I always saw them as very complementary, and I still do. The ironic thing is that a lot of the larger tech companies that you see now are actually trying to bring those pieces back together, where they're traditional, data center and infrastructure companies, and they're trying to kind of bolt on these cloud practices.
mm,
And I think that there's some effectiveness there. I mean, they certainly have a base of customers that are maybe looking to make that transition. Um,
mm,
we really feel like one of the things that helps us be as good as we are at what we do is that we do that. We're laser focused on cloud, and not only just cloud, Azure cloud, the Microsoft ecosystem, cloud native apps, cloud transformation, building, data and data warehousing, all that, and doing that in the cloud. And how do we do that better that way? So
yeah.
yeah,
It's a really, really crazy space, like trying to keep up. I remember uh, talking at a recent actually the Power BI meetup. I was talking with somebody about, I when they need to figure something out. Well, I just need to have good Google skills, but I'm remembering like the two, 2005 days when you're working with SQL Server. It's like the the cycle was uh, book publishers, right? I mean, there was like a couple big websites, but you couldn't just Google things, and it's crazy how different it is. Like not not only are all the things moving so fast that book publishing is a really really tough, and I hear that book publishers are absolutely desperate for getting some technical guys to write for them because it's like everything's podcasts and blogs, and it's like, and the information is everywhere, and just like a SQL 22 release which just happened, everybody's trying to get on top of that so they can you know tease out all the new features and the pluses and minuses and get that content out there. And it's like, well, it used to be like 3 year releases and you'd write
yeah.
your book and you know what I mean? So
For those
it's
big
changed so
thick
fast.
books we used to go buy, and it was talking all about the latest things of SQL and how you do this and do that. Yeah,
Right.
and now like that release cycle, people want that stuff in blog posts and like you said, in podcasts and stuff, and they want to get that out there like it's almost immediate. It's
Yeah.
amazing.
Yeah. Yeah. But I mean, it's a fun time to be in too. Like you might not have the robustness and the fleshed out ideas and features and all that kind of stuff. But you could do some really incredible things that you're just having to change the way that you think. So it's pretty crazy. I guess with that though, what what would you say? Like, what are you seeing in the cloud space? You could call a lot of these cloud technologies fairly mature at this point, even though there are constant releases. How do you see people using it differently, like versus with your clients versus like let's say a decade ago, what you might have been seeing in the cloud?
It's interesting because I've been along for kind of the whole ride because I remember, early on when cloud was coming out, and to be frank, like, if you go back 10 years, when it was pretty early, maybe even further than that, um, I I I won't say I was a skeptic, but it was not, that wasn't something we were doing as part of our business model. And would have
Yeah.
customers ask us about it. And we are like, yeah, I don't know. We kind of need to wait and see, like, is this going to be a real thing, or not? And it wasn't that we ever thought it wasn't going to be a real thing. It's just how long is it going to take us to get there? Because if you remember the early days of Office 365, or it was even called, I don't even remember the name of it before that, but it was called something else, the Microsoft's cloud product. Yeah, we
Mm.
used to call it, Office 362 because there was so much downtime, and customers would have issues and stuff. And, we actually years ago, like, declouded a customer because they had moved, and they were like, oh, this is a disaster. There was also a lot of issues early on, um, with just controlling costs. Like, there was just sprawl, and customers would get out there and be like, wow, I can spin up servers and it's just amazing. And they were used to these like on-premise VMware environments or something where there wasn't a huge incremental cost to add another server and things. And
Right.
so they just, it kind of ebbed and flowed and took some weird turns along the way. But I will say this, like, when I left Presidio, who I had sold my last company to, and came to Emergent. So Presidio was a very big AWS partner, and I had
Mm.
gone to the AWS, their partner, or their conference, the year prior, and saw all the things going on there, and started. There's actually a really good book, even though we do all of our work in the Microsoft ecosystem. Andy Jassy actually wrote a very good book, called Ahead in the Clouds. It's an old book. It's nothing new, but I
Mhm.
read that book years and years ago, and it was one of the first times that it all started to click, this idea of like building cloud native software and
Mhm.
microservices and platform as a service, not the traditional like three-tier, software
Yep.
architecture.
I remember that. Yeah.
And
Mhm.
that's when it started for me. That actually was when I was like, yeah, this pivot's going to happen, and it's not going to happen overnight. It's happening, and it will continue to happen because it takes a while to rewrite a lot of that software and things like that. But that is where the industry's going. So it really got me excited, coming over to Emergent Software.
Mhm.
I really just dove headfirst into like we had been a Microsoft partner. I have worked with Microsoft for almost 20 years now.
Mhm.
Um, but I really hadn't spent a lot of time digging into, what are people really doing in Azure? What are people doing in that cloud space? And I was blown away with, the the things that are available, on a platform as a service, um, uh, offering, where it the beautiful thing is that you can turn on these services
Mhm.
for smaller customers if you want, where before, if you were in an on-prem environment, like, think about things like a SIM solution, right? You would have to go out and buy a SIM, and it'd be this big project to integrate it with all your applications and your network equipment, your firewalls,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
smaller customers just couldn't really do that. And
Mm.
now in the cloud, I can turn that on, click in some connectors, and 3 4 hours later, I've got all this telemetry data feeding into this SIM, and it's not costing them an arm and a leg to do it. And
Right.
so it's been really interesting to see a lot of that. We've been having a lot of really fun conversations with clients around modernizing their applications and re-envisioning a lot of like really old legacy on-prem applications that were written 10, 15 years ago, and like helping them kind of re-envision what that would look like to be rebuilt as a cloud native application,
Right.
and how they can use that pivot, because obviously there's an investment in there, but they can use that to help pivot to use technology as a competitive advantage for their business and not just look at it as like this expense. So we've been
Right.
modernizing, Java applications and old mainframe applications, and it's really, really cool to see what customers are doing there. And every customer is a little unique in what their environment looks like. So yeah.
Yeah, you never know what you're gonna see, right? Yeah, yeah, that is the fun part too. And also um the good and the bad is like just the diversity of solutions that you can bring to bear for some of this stuff, like I'm trying to remember. Oh yeah, I was looking for a solution that was non-SFTP, just like spinning up FTP in the cloud. And I was just absolutely amazed with all the solutions. Like, of course, the main solution you wanted to do uh, couldn't quite do FTP the way that we wanted, but then it was like, okay, well, let's see what else we got here. It's just like, well, you got a few hundred to choose from. Which which would you like?
Yeah.
So
That's the great is that there are so many options out there, and it just gives you a really, I like to talk about it like a canvas. It's this canvas that you can paint whatever you want on it.
mhm.
There's just so much at your disposal, but you're able to build these applications and do things for clients that just in the past, to build all that out on premise just for them would have been really, really expensive. So I
Yeah,
I love being able to see that technology that was really only available to some of the largest companies in the world now coming down and being able to be used for smaller companies.
yeah, yeah, exactly. And I'm thinking a decade ago, helping a buddy um, get a SQL server running, for this like small to medium sized firm, but they were very much not a technology company, right? They just had some software that ran on SQL Server, and I'm thinking back to those days, and it's like, you're trying to figure the cheapest like server you could build, and I was going in somebody's closet or whatever, and
Yeah.
it's still a chunk of thousands, just to get the SQL on a server with Windows, and and now it's like, I mean, comparatively, it's pennies on the dollar to spin up an Azure SQL, and it's just, I mean,
But
that in itself is just so cool. I mean, I really like that. So,
yeah. And we were just working on a project with a customer, and it was a very large scale project. And we were debating between, do we use SQL or Cosmos DB,
mm-hmm.
which was a really interesting conversation. You talk about options, and obviously there's other options out there as well, Postgres and other NoSQL products and things. But it was really interesting and fun and unique to be able to be having this conversation, because before, I mean, we just kind of always defaulted to SQL, and SQL still is a great answer for a lot, probably most applications. But there are use cases and unique fits for other solutions that now are available that are really cool.
Yeah, exactly. And SQL is, this is from the perspective of a guy who's been using it since 2000, right? But SQL is kind of taking a turn for the weird, which is great. But I went deep into the internals, right? So I knew how all these parts worked, right? And now, I think just the other day I saw an announcement for Azure SQL where you can just natively query something that's totally not a database, like just a bunch of different cloud connectors. And like, Okay, so I know how this engine works. Now they're adding like a Wankel engine here and maybe like some kind of rotary helicopter engine over there. And I'm like, the dev in me likes where this is going, but the DBA is like, how do you tune like a CSV file? You know what I mean? It's like, how's that gonna even work? But but it's great. I kind of wonder, where they're trying to end up with how they're building it out, because it almost seems like they want to make SQL like the lingua franca for data, even though you do have things like Cosmos DB and whatnot. But um, yeah, it's a really
Yeah,
interesting space.
I hope they don't. I hope they don't try to make it all things to all people, because I think that SQL is. I think you could ruin it in a way. Like, it is so good at what it's good at, and like, let's just let it excel at that, and
Yeah,
allow it to scale and figure out more ways for availability and all the different things that you can do with that, and then let these other products fit the niche that they need to fit. That's the way I would look at it. But
yeah. I'm with you, and I kind of like the way that they're doing the extension kind of thing, where it's not exactly SQL, but you can add this module, like if you want to do some R, or if you want to start writing Java as of like SQL 22 or something like that. They're kind of plugins, which is more, as I talk to more people who are doing Python, which is kind of the let's say the newer generations are kind of doing that now. There's just a module for this or a module for that. It's an open source model, right? So you can just add a new plugin to do something really interesting, which is a lot different than I used to think. I'll just say that.
mm, yeah,
Yeah, well, I'm sure I have a bias to talk about SQL all day long, but I'm kind of curious, like for for younger folks who might want to drink through the fire hose and get into consulting, especially with the kind of stuff that you guys do. Like, what would you recommend younger folks if they wanted to get into some of the spaces that you guys do consulting in?
yeah. That's a great question. It's funny because um, I mean, I think back 20 years ago, and it was actually right about now, because it was around November when they closed the plant that I worked at ADC, and I was doing my MBA at night,
Mhm.
uh, and I was kind of contemplating starting this business, Emergent Networks, and um, early on, it was going to be really focused on. I built out this spam filter. Um,
Mhm.
that was based on Linux. So I had these Linux servers out there in data centers, and like back then, spam was like this new thing that a lot of companies didn't know how to like get rid of, and it was driving people crazy. I
Great.
was I was charging $7 a user per month to filter out spam for clients. And so I started with that. I did a lot of stuff on Linux then. I actually did a lot of development myself back then, and then kind of moved into some of the server and virtualization stuff like that. But I just remember before, when I was starting the business, I talked to a guy that I knew. It was one of my friend's dads, actually, who owned a business manufacturing company.
Hmm.
And I was kind of talking to him about my situation and asking for advice and stuff. And he made a comment that I really I've remembered ever since. And I do believe he said, like, because there was this concern. I had this concern of, like, I was at this big company with 20,000 employees, and you
Hmm.
know I was going to be at this small. And he said, smaller companies are. I'm paraphrasing here. I don't remember exactly the words, but it's something to the effect of like, hey, don't be afraid to be at a small company. Like, there's way more fun. You get to build like real relationships, and you're going to get to do a lot of things.
Yeah.
And so obviously, small company of one, I got to do everything. But one of the things, I really appreciated my engineering background. I did electrical engineering as an undergrad, and
Hmm.
I have not used any electrical engineering knowledge in the last probably 20 years, but it did teach me, it taught me how to solve problems, how to troubleshoot issues and things like that. So I appreciated that. But I think, for new people that are trying to get into the space, I think um, consulting is it's a lot of work. It's hard work, and you really have to be able to learn because you're going to get thrown into new situations all the time,
Yeah.
and you got to be able to learn what is this customer's business, what do they do, what makes them successful. You got to be able to learn the technologies that they're using, um, and so I think there's that. I think I'm a big, I talk about this with a lot, just about everyone I talk to, but I'm a relationship guy. I believe very strongly in, doing good work and building strong relationships, and that will pay you back tenfold, and honesty and integrity. And, if you make a mistake for a client, like, own it, make it right, fix it.
Yeah.
They don't expect you to be perfect, but so those are some of the things in how I've done it. I remember early on, I was probably 25 maybe at the time, maybe 26. And I remember I'm sitting in a board meeting
Mhm.
with all of these executives of this customer of mine. And these guys are all CEO, CFO, CIO. Everyone's got to see something or other, and board members, and they're all like in their 50s and 60s and have been doing this for so many years.
Yeah.
And I'm sitting there and I'm like looking around. It's this surreal moment, and I'm like, what am I doing in this room? Like, how did I get here? I am out of place, whatever. But I remember talking to someone about that afterwards, and it was actually one of the people that was in the room. I was actually the CEO of the company, and he had become a friend, and he said, "You were in there because we we don't have some of the knowledge that you have on these technologies and things, and
Right.
like there's value there. Like, it doesn't matter the age." And he's like, "You need to be confident in these things that you know." And so I always, from then on, and I've advised some of my friends that have called me and talked to me about this. I had a friend who called and had an opportunity to get a CFO position, and he's like, "I just don't feel qualified for it." I said, "Well, they think you are, so take it
Right.
and figure it out."
Right.
So it's been a lot of my career has been kind of figuring things out as you go. And one of the best things that I've done is I've hired a lot of people that are a lot smarter than me, and let
Exactly.
them what they're good at.
Yeah. Yeah. That's really great. Like, especially if you know that you don't have to be the expert in everything, right? You just have to be good at what they need you to be good at. So that's a really good lesson. And and no offense to some of the techies out there, I can appreciate it, but also soft skills. work on the work on the soft skills because um, yeah, as far as consulting, you definitely need to be able to communicate early, communicate often, and when you do make mistakes, like if people know that it was a potential risk, they'll like you way more than if it's bouncing around in your head. What if this happens? And not voicing that as a potential risk. It's like, well, this happened. I warned you about it. I mean, not that it has to be about that, but that just goes to the communicating, early and often. It's like, well, then there's a lot less surprises versus, just doing your heads down coding and then not talking to anybody about the potential stuff that
Yeah,
could go wrong or whatever. So
no, I think you're spot on. I think that those soft skills, those communication skills are they're very important. It's not you don't have to be an orator and be able to get up and, do Toastmasters or something like that, but just being able to have a conversation with people. I just came from a lunch with a client, and we spent the first 10 minutes just talking about his daughter going to college and what he's doing for Thanksgiving and other things like that. And it's just having a conversation with someone and being curious about their life and building a relationship with them. There's nothing uber technical about that, um, but yeah, and then like you said, communicating, when things are going off track or something. Like I have had times in my life where, I thought it would be better to, well, I'm going to fix it and make it right, and they'll never even know that something was going wrong. And what I should have done is let them know, hey, there's something that's not going right, but I've got a plan. But I tried to fix it without letting them know. And then, they kind of figure it out that things aren't going right, and just never ends well. But sometimes you have
Yeah.
to learn the hard way.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I think especially if you're young and you're doing things really quick, and it's like it's really tempting to just like, oh yeah, I'll just fix it there, and hopefully get, sometimes you just make it worse, and it's like, uh, could have done better there. Uh, well, I am kind of curious too about Emergent. Like, do you guys have anything interesting going on that you're like in anything that has really got your interest personally that's going on in the business that people might want to hear about?
You know, um, we have some really interesting projects right now. I probably won't get into any specifics on any of them because they're client specific. But what I have found and what I'm really enjoying is um, when I'm having conversations with customers. If you think about like custom software development and app modernization, and then you think about the cloud and cloud transformation, and you think about data.
Hmm.
And we really sit at the intersection of all those conversations, and can really pull them all together and do some really, really fun things for our clients in terms of things that can really change how they do business. It can change they can use technology, and you hear this so often now, is like, I'm a technology company that does this versus, I'm a technology company that collects trash versus I'm a garbage collector, whatever.
Right.
Um, because people are using technology to do things differently. And I feel like more than, my past business where we were just kind of using technology to helping people, use technology, we're actually able to create and do really interesting things through software and infrastructure as code and data and analytics and all of that stuff. So that's really, those are the things that we're doing that are exciting. And we're working across, I mean, healthcare and manufacturing and transportation logistics, and um, have some very large international companies that we're working with that are just, it's really fun to see the variety and where all of the problems that they're trying to solve are all different, but we have an interesting seat at the table with the areas of where we play. So yeah, that's kind of what we're doing right now. That's exciting. I think the other thing for us, and this isn't really as related to technology, but just that full pivot into being a fully remote company
Yeah.
and really owning that.
Mm.
I wrote up a little thing actually when we flew everyone in for our all company meeting. I spent about the first half hour talking about culture and how culture is not, it doesn't require a building to build culture in a company. It's not just about, building relationships happens that way sometimes, and being able to go out for happy hour and things like that. That's a great way to build relationships. But culture and the culture of a company is, how do the employees treat each other? And, do we want to be a company that, are we always thinking about new ideas and new ways to do things, or do we always fall back to, well, this is how he's always done it, right? That's a
Right.
culture issue in a company. Do we want to be a place where, when we interact with customers or we interact with potential employees, they walk away and go, wow, I don't know what they're doing over there, but they have fun. Or do they walk away and go, I don't know what's going on there, but I don't want to work there. Like that's a
Right.
culture conversation.
Yeah.
And so we're really excited about this, being fully remote. And it's really interesting when you close that final door of your office and you've gotten rid of all your office furniture and everything, and you really embrace it and you start to think about, like, okay, how can we do things differently? There's a lot of really fun stuff that happens. And so I'm excited about that.
Yeah. Yeah. That sounds really great. I like it is kind of interesting seeing how different places handle going fully remote. And yeah, if you do embrace it, there's a lot of fears and what ifs that come with remote, but we got lots of practice there too. And it's just like, well, you know, there's good people for your culture, and maybe there's not so great people for your culture. So it's more about the people instead of obsessing about, like the exact you know minutia of, things that I guess really kind of what I'm getting at is like, there's a certain element of letting go when you go fully remote, but once you finally do, I bet, yeah, like you're saying, a lot of great things can happen.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, do you wanna tell folks where people can find you and get more info about Emergent Software?
Yeah, absolutely. Our website obviously is a great place to go. We're going to be refreshing it this spring. So, but right now, yeah, emergentsoftware.net is a great place to find us. Also, following us on LinkedIn is great. We do a lot of social media posts and things on LinkedIn, so it's probably the place to get the latest news on what's going on. But yeah, that's it. And my contact information's on the website, so I'm always open to having conversations with people. And I love conversations like this, so I really appreciate you having me on and just talking about technology in the space, and hearing a little bit about what we do.
Yeah, yeah, and I like to hear it too, because if you don't have conversations with different leaders, whether it's in the tech space or running companies and whatnot, you don't get a good sense of what's going on as much. So I really do enjoy these conversations too. So
Yeah,
yeah, yeah, thank you for that, and thanks a lot for coming on. I really do appreciate it.
yeah, that's great.
Yeah, and well, thank you everybody for listening, and I hope you guys have a good day. Thanks. Bye. Thanks so much, everyone, for listening to the Covering Data podcast. If you'd like to learn more about how I can help you with your database needs, check out my website at coveringdata.com or email me at eric@coveringdata.com. Have a wonderful day, everyone. Thanks.